All right, welcome to another episode of the Political Playbook. We got a special one for you guys today. The United States has officially struck Iran on Iranian soil. So, massive strike on Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, which are the three main nuclear facilities. The bombs include 12 bunker buster bombs on Fordow, 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from a submarine on Natanz and Isfahan, and then also two more bunker buster bombs dropped on Natanz as well. We're still trying to assess the damage. There's some skeptical reports on whether or not the damage has been successful. The Israelis appear to be more skeptical than us about the damage. We'll get into that later on, I'm sure. But I guess Garrett, our rational MAGA guy, what is your opinion of the strike overall?
So on the last podcast we did together, we kind of touched on what I wanted to see Trump do in Iran. And this is exactly it. I think the Iranians have fucked around long enough, and it's time for them to get the find out into the fuck around stick. Um, this is this is the exact posturing I want to see out of the White House. The foreign policy, the you are going to fall in line, or we are going to beat you until you fall in line. I love this idea, and I love seeing Iranian's nuclear program, what is hopefully now entirely destroyed.
Yeah, I mean we'll assess the damage later on. I mean it's going to take some time. Specifically on Fordow, the Israeli officials are concerned that either A, they've already like removed all their equipment and their uranium, or that it just wasn't enough because even though it's 12 bunker buster bombs, by the way, those things are massive. By the way, they're 30 feet long, solid
Yeah.
steel. They weigh 10,000 fucking pounds. They're not a joke. And we dropped
Yeah.
a
I don't know.
14 on them.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I sent a video to the chat about and it's just going around on Instagram. I don't know if it's actual footage, but the footage that's claiming to be of these bunker busters hitting Fordo, I mean, it looks like a nuclear weapon almost. It puts off a mushroom cloud.
Well,
Um, it, it
the
it's
amount of
absolutely insane.
Yeah, the amount of ordnances, if you measure the explosion in tons of TNT, it's actually bigger than both the atomic bombs we dropped on Japan. It's just not a nuclear version of the bombs.
Right.
Yeah, which is nuts. But yeah, I think that this strike was probably more successful than the skeptics probably think. I think that this, it just had to be out of necessity. Well, I mean, we'll find out, you know. But you're a fan of this strike, like regardless of whether or not it was or wasn't a complete success. You're a big fan of like this like bombing Iran, even though Iran hasn't done anything to us.
Yeah. So I am. I think Iran's, like I said, been screwing around for, I mean, almost 50 years at this point with the U.S. So we had obviously the embassy issue. I can't remember who that was under. It was a famous screw up by the president who was currently there. And then we also had, what was it, Praying Mantis Operation, where they tried to basically control the Strait of Hormuz. That was a long time ago. And then more recently, like it's just the funding of terror proxies. Al Qaeda, Iraq, um, Al Qaeda in Iraq. I apologize. ISIS, ISIL, all of these different terror proxies and terror arms they have. The Houthis in Yemen. So I'm ready to see people who chant "Death to America" taken off the chessboard.
Gotcha.
At least as far. Go ahead. Sorry.
So it sounds like you would totally support regime change then.
So right now, I will say, so at the very beginning of this conflict, everyone, at least from the White House, was saying like, no, no regime change. We're just like, stop the nuclear program. We want to make a deal. As of today, basically everyone, Pete Hegseth came on this morning and did a briefing, and then there was somebody else there with him, and I can't remember their name, but they're basically everyone now is saying regime change. Like, the consensus is the Ayatollah has waited too long to make a deal, and now you're not only are we destroying your nuclear program, you are going to be out of power. Now, as we speak, this is 1:30 Central Time. The Ayatollah is still alive somewhere. How long that remains the case, who knows? I'm kind of at a middle ground right now, so I would support the Ayatollah staying in power and staying in charge. should he surrender any kind of nuclear aspirations, nuclear enrichment aspirations. So from what we know, the deal that was on the table prior to Israeli engagement and was apparently still on the table was Iran, you are no longer even going to be able to enrich uranium within your own country. You can buy the 3 to 5% enriched uranium you need for nuclear power from other countries like China, who you're already allied with. And they showed absolutely no interest in that. And as far as I know, still show no interest in that. For at least from what we can gather from their Twitter page, they are ready to fight this out. So I know they've put all U.S. bases in the Middle East on high alert. That would, I think, be a grievous mistake on Iran's part. Like, so right now, we have come in and we have destroyed what we wanted to destroy. If you look at the flight path of these B-2, so it was 7 B-2 bombers, escorted by, I think, 35 F-15s, maybe F-35s. But these crossed over basically the entire globe. They went over multiple countries. It would have been like almost an all-day flight from where they left to where they dropped these ordnance, and not one single country threw up the flag. Like this was and a lot of people are saying this, at least from the White House. This was an astonishing level of competency on keeping this mission on the down low. Like nobody was aware this was happening until Trump goes on Truth Social and says, "Hey, by the way, we just got done fucking up Iran." Like,
Right. Right. Yeah. So I'm sure Operation, maybe they weren't using that messaging app, which is probably good.
yeah. I honestly, I think he would have kept it even a secret from his own administration at this point because of the signal chat leak. So like if you were to ask me, like, do I think Tulsi Gabbard was aware of this? Probably not. Probably not. Do I think that even the vice president, JD Vance, was aware? Maybe not. And it's just because, like, so in this last signal chat leak, he was kind of opposed to intervening against the Houthis. So of course he would be opposed, and we all know JD Vance is more of an isolationist, but he would definitely be opposed to nuclear, not nuclear, God forbid nuclear, to these strikes in Iran on their nuclear facilities.
Gotcha. And one of the things I wanted to touch on is you think that like this is the way to go. So you're more hawkish on Iran. Um, so walk me through this. Would you rather have this, like what's going on now, or would you rather have the nuclear deal that Obama struck?
So my issue with the nuclear deal that Obama struck, and my issue in the last podcast with the deal that Trump was pitching, was I just don't trust Iran to
It's
abide
not
by
about
it.
trust. It's not about trust, right?
I mean, to me, it is. So again, in
No, no, no,
Fordow,
no, no, no,
they
no, 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 no. This is not like what you think, right? Like there is no trust involved. It's not like we're saying, "Hey, don't do this," and we're just going to take your word. We're not doing this on the honor system, right?
so is the question, can we when I answer the question, we can assume they are going to abide by whatever nuclear deal it was? Is that what you're saying?
No, 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 no. The question is not will they. The question or the statement of fact is that they were abiding by the nuclear deal.
They weren't abiding by the nuclear deal. I mean, so the
That's
IAEA
a,
came
no, that's
out and
not
said
true.
that they weren't abiding by it. They weren't allowing
Who said that?
global oversight into places like Fordow, the IAEA.
The IAEA said explicitly, the director of the guy who got, because the Israelis have been citing that same report, and the IAEA said they do not plan to build a nuclear bomb. That was explicitly what they said. And this is just a statement of fact. Like, they're not required to, first of all, they weren't near weapons grade, but they're not required anymore for the verifications. Like, the reason they're kicking out the UN people is because they're like, well, we signed the deal. You guys pulled out of it. So why would we keep
So
letting you in?
even during Obama's deal, though, places like Fordow were not allowed UN oversight. Like this is the thing. Like even when Obama was in office in 2015, they were already saying like, "Hey, we're not letting you guys come and patrol certain areas of Fordow specifically."
I
Which
don't
is
think
there.
that's
If you don't know
true.
what Fordow is, it 100% is. I found the article. I think I sent it to the chat, but it wasn't like this wasn't like a I
They
don't know,
they
like an off-brand
sold
newspaper. I'm pretty sure
they
it was
sold
CNN.
they sold all their uranium, their enriched uranium to the United States. Okay. They didn't have any more, and they never enriched past 5%. That's according to U.S. intelligence, the United Nations, pretty much everyone but the Israelis.
Okay, everyone but the Israelis. I mean, so we know that we can't fully trust Israeli. Like as good as Mossad is, it's either deliberate misinformation or they're being lied to. Their intelligence is just bad because their intelligence was bad on the WMDs in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? So we know that we can't always trust Israeli intelligence. And then we of course have Tulsi Gabbard coming on in March and saying like, hey, they're not pursuing a nuclear weapon. I just so let me lay out my logic for you. So Iran, since the pullout by Trump of the deal, right? So this is reasonably a result of pulling out of this deal, right? Is Iran has been rapidly expanding their nuclear enrichment program. So they had up anywhere from 60 to 80%. I think that is confirmed by UN watchdogs. 60 to 80% enriched uranium,
Hmm.
which I think weapons grade uranium it starts at like 90% is when you
Right.
can start building a nuclear bomb.
Hmm.
They also rapidly expanded their ballistic missile program. So this is actually something that I wanted to touch on too. So in the beginning of this conflict with directly with Iran, um, obviously Israel conducts these airstrikes. Iran starts bombing back, right? They send drones, they send missiles. At the very beginning, between the U.S. THAAD system, David's Sling, the Arrow, I think it's the Arrow 1 through 3, and then of course Iron Dome, Israel had a like 90% stop rate. So out of 100 missiles, 10 hit, and which is still really good for an air defense system. I do know that prior to these strikes, the reported numbers were that was down to 60%. And the reason I think this is relevant is because have you heard about the Chinese aircraft that have been landing in Iran?
I have not.
So over the course of the last week, China has actually been sending aircraft, and the aircraft when they take off from China are supposed to be going to like Brussels, like they're supposed to be landing in Brussels, but they always divert and drop off radar in Kazakhstan, Iran. And we have footage of them landing in Iran. Now we don't know what's on the aircraft, but my thinking is the reason that the air defense system is doing so much more poorly is a combination of one, they're getting more high-tech missiles from China. Whether they're hypersonic or not, I could not tell you, and I don't think anybody could tell you. Um, well, I'm sure someone could tell you, but they're not telling us, at least at this time. And then also, the reality of air defense is that you're shooting down, and this was brought up with the Houthis too. They're sending $150 drones with explosives, and it costs $25 million to send up an intercept missile, right? So the intercept missiles are a lot more expensive than the missiles that you're actually shooting down, and you're just depleting those resources. You have a finite number of intercept missiles, and when it comes to air defense, you are at some point you have to strategically start choosing which missiles you're intercepting. So you can calculate like, okay, this missile is going to land, in a farm in the middle of the West Bank. We're not going to stop that missile. Whereas if it was to hit, the center of Tel Aviv, okay, we're going to shoot that one down. Um, and all of this to say that I think the war was seriously escalating. So one, the air defense rate dropping like that is bad. So that's just going to end with more damage in Israel proper. Um, and what was I saying? Chinese support. What form that Chinese support is, I don't know, but I really do speculate that they're getting higher tech level missiles. Still probably low tech for China. Iron Dome is pretty old at this point. Now the U.S. THAAD system is very up to date and widely regarded as a very good intercept system. But yeah, I think this war was escalating. I don't think the Ayatollah were coming to the table. One of the big
Wait,
things
wait,
too, and
wait.
this
Really quick, really quick, really quick. Why was the war escalating?
the war was escalating because I think Iran was getting more of its chop. So again, in the beginning of this week,
Iran was getting
uh,
more of its chop?
yeah. Okay, so hang on. I'm not saying that Iran started this war. I mean, so
Well,
I
right,
could
that would
make
be false, right?
well, no. So they do fund these terrorist
No, no, no,
proxies,
no, 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 no,
Hezbollah,
right, right.
and no, I don't think that
Iran
Israel
did
started
not
the war.
start this war. Israel did start the war. Are you out of your mind?
Who funds Hezbollah?
A number of people, but Iran is one of them. The primary
Okay,
funder.
who funds Hamas?
Iran, yeah.
Okay, who funds the Houthis?
Iran.
Okay. So we can agree that these are terrorist proxies that have been attacking Israel for the past, what, 3 years? Since October
Sure.
7th, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Who else funds them?
So I couldn't tell you.
Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Egypt,
Well, so
several.
Qatar is a proxy state of Iran.
No, it's not.
Um, Egypt, yeah, sure it is. Sure it is.
Qatar
Um,
is arguably an ally of the United States. What do you mean?
I disagree.
We have bases
So when you
there. What do you
harbor
mean?
when you harbor these terrorist leadership, like, and you're trying to keep them safe, like I don't consider you an ally. Like if you're harboring U.S. targets and saying like, hey, you can't hit us, we're neutral space. I don't believe in neutral space in global politics. Like I don't believe in the Swiss model of like, hey, we're just gonna bank for everybody, yada yada. No, you choose a side, and by not
Right.
choosing a
So
side,
so when Trump was in Qatar and he was talking about how great the partnership was, that was a bluff or a lie? Doesn't make any sense.
so
You
I
know what I
think when
mean?
Trump,
Like you're
so
you're out of your mind.
no, you have to when Trump talks about these things. So like he talks about Russia and being super close with Russia or being super close with Kim Jong Un. He's doing it in the context of a negotiation. Like he's not going to just bash people who he's actively trying to negotiate a deal with. Now I can't remember what the deal was with Qatar.
I don't think
Um,
there was a deal with Qatar. I
but that's
don't
just
think there was. It's just they're absolutely our allies. I mean, for God's sakes, they just gifted Trump a $250 million jet airliner. Like,
yeah, but that's not like so.
okay,
I,
regardless,
I
regardless. Here's my point though. My point is that like yes, Iran is funding all of these proxy states, but they're not nearly the level of proxy states that we thought. It's not like Iran is pulling the puppet strings of these countries nearly to the extent that we think. And B, they're not the only funders. Like, there's nothing uniquely you can say about Iran you can't say about Qatar or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Syria before, obviously, the fall of Assad.
I
Um,
mean, well, so that's true. So what I would say is that Iran has also directly attacked Israel. So after Israel conducted an elimination in what was it, Syria? It was in Damascus.
right.
They hit a group of Hamas leadership in the Iranian embassy in Syria, and Iran launched a retaliation. Now, this retaliation, most people seem to think like it was just a show, like, hey, we know you're going to be able to shoot these down, but we're going to launch them anyway because we have to save face. And I kind of
Exactly.
concur. I kind of concur with that. But the point is, you did launch strikes into Israel in retaliation for what they did in Damascus. Now, and then the question is like, well,
But
what was your leadership doing with leadership of Hamas? Like, why are they there? Why are they at the Iranian embassy in Syria? Like, I am dubious that Iran is not as influential in these terrorist arms as you say they are.
well, I mean, they're just not. They can't afford to be. You know. I mean, they're literally faced. They're on the brink of extinction right now. You know. Um,
So that's true, and so we have heard so at least since this a lot of so like Hezbollah and I think the Houthis specifically. There's nothing from Hamas, but Hamas is fucking wiped out. Um, they're all saying that like if the U.S. entered the war, then they were gonna enter the war, and then yada yada yada. Um, Iran is pretty short on allies right now, so Russia basically gave him the middle finger, like, hey, you're on your own, guy. There's no mutual defense treaty here. This isn't NATO. Um, China is giving them what I assume is high tech level missiles or higher tech level missiles, but it's going to be interesting to see if these Iranian terrorist arms come in defense of Iran now that the U.S. has officially entered the war.
well, so this is actually why I kind of oppose this strike is that like diplomacy was working. Like certainly diplomacy was better than like what happened under Obama was certainly better than a hot war against Iran, okay? And there's just so many avenues for this to go haywire. For example, we have 40,000 troops in the Middle East. Some of them are right across the border, like in Qatar, right? Because we have a naval and an air force base there. We have a million bases in Iraq that are literally within. It's easy to shoot down a missile from Iran to Israel, right? Because you got 500 miles, right? So that's 500 miles of
Yeah.
vision, 500 miles to intercept. Some of these are less than 60 miles to U.S. bases. Just
Right.
So by the
In
time
Iran, I would think one of their Twitter posts was actually saying like we can hit U.S. bases a lot easier than we can hit Israel after this. And again, I think that would
well,
be a
that's just a fact.
grievous miscalculation. Yeah, I mean, so I'm not disagreeing with that statement. I'm saying I think that would be a grievous miscalculation on Iran's part.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's the problem is that like you're relying on these people that like according to you, right? You're relying on the constraint of these people that are chanting death to America and they hate us. You're relying on their constraint. I mean, like what kind of a strategy is that? That doesn't make
so
any sense.
I'm relying on their selfish inclination towards life. That is what I'm relying on. Now, the Ayatollah may have no regard for their own life. I mean, so we've encountered regimes like that before. The Viet Cong had no regard for their own lives. People who fight for like especially in a religious cause, which I believe Iran's cause is a religious cause, they typically don't have that selfish inclination. Now, how this turns out, how Iran retaliates, I could not say. I think they're going to have to retaliate. You know what? I can't even say that. I think that I am hoping that this strike is like, hey, we are grievously outgunned. No one is coming to our aid. Let's go to the table. Let's get this deal signed. We're not going to enrich uranium anymore. Um, and move forward. And that's part of the reason that I think
Wait,
the
but even
Ayatollah.
if that's true, wait, time out. But even if that's true, you said you don't trust these people. Even if they sign a deal, you said you
Right.
wouldn't trust it.
So I would hope that well,
So we
one,
just
so it's
have to
not
keep bombing them.
so it's not about trust at this point, like you said. We have eliminated all of their nuclear capacity. Hopefully that's what the intelligence actually shows, is that we have actually destroyed Fordow. We have actually destroyed these bases. We've destroyed like their uranium mining, even I think has been targeted by Israelis, and obviously other enrichment facilities and stuff like that. I think in tandem with the U.S. airstrikes, Israel was also taking out a bunch of their F-14 programs with drones. There's some footage of that. I can't confirm that for sure. Um, but there was definitely footage of it posted on Twitter of them blowing up F-14s. It seems like as a distraction, maybe. Um, but yeah. So at this point, I would say like we can be assured of their compliance because they do not have the capacity, would be the hope.
Right, yeah, and that that worked out in Iraq, and that worked out in Libya and in Syria. So yeah, I see no reason to be skeptical here.
I mean, so there might be reason to be skeptical. And this is something I wanted to touch on too, is this went massively underreported. But there are reports of an earthquake in Iran on January 20th, which is what I think kind of led Trump to actually go ahead and do these strikes. So the reports were of a 5.3 magnitude earthquake just east of Tehran. Now, the reason this is worrisome is because we know that at least with North Korea, and then there was another state, it may have been Pakistan, but they do their nuclear testing underground. So when North Korea was doing their nuclear testing, the resulting earthquakes were about 5.8. The other country that was doing it, which again escapes me and I apologize, they registered about a 5.5. So this 5.3 earthquake just east of Tehran that went massively underreported, even by Iranian media, uh, and also obviously the U.S. media, and is not near a fault line. I think this was at least a subtle an implication of perhaps nuclear underground testing. And at 5.3, that would mean that they have a functioning nuclear bomb.
Oh, you're out of your
Now,
mind. The idea that they have a nuclear weapon is absurd. The
why,
Israelis are lying. It's just
So
not
why?
true.
So again, I kind of laid out my logic. So they started their enrichment program to enrich to 60 or 80%. Now you would agree that while that's not weapon grade, that is easily ramped up to weapons grade, correct?
Wait, so you're
Like
saying it's not weapons grade, but they're ramping up towards it? Yeah, sure.
no. From the point of 80%, it is easy to rapidly move to 90 to weapons grade, right? You would
Sure.
agree with that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, so you'd have to concede that they've been rapidly expanding their ballistic missile program.
Right. Of course.
Okay. So why would you do that if not in pursuit of a nuclear weapon?
As a deterrent, for the same
Right,
reason.
but the
Hold
deterrent
on.
is the
For the
nuclear weapon.
same for
Right?
the same reason, Brazil, Japan, Germany have what they called threshold capabilities. So they don't have nuclear weapons. They have a similar amount of enriched uranium, right? And they have a ballistic missile program, so that way, if shit hits the fan, they have the capability to make a nuclear weapon as a deterrent. It's the same logic. And that's not me saying that. That is United States military doctrine since 2003. Tulsi Gabbard affirmed that same doctrine in March in that testimony. And this is not controversial what I'm saying.
So, okay. So just explain to me how getting
Marco
your
Rubio said
systems
it
in
today.
place,
Marco
where
Rubio
you
said it today.
when you're putting system in place to rapidly be able to produce a nuclear weapon as a deterrent, how is that not pursuing a nuclear weapon?
Because they don't want a
So
nuclear
if I'm
weapon. They want the capability to make one in case they need to,
so
which
these things are interchangeable though.
no, they're
These
not.
things are interchangeable though. So like just I'm trying to think of an analogy, but so like if I'm pushing a pawn in chess, I am rapidly pursuing a promotion, right? Is that not the same thing as pursuing the promotion? Like
No,
so
it's
my
not.
pawn is moving
No,
forward
it's
as a
not.
deterrent.
You understand the concept of chess of deflection, right? In order to move a piece. Sorry for the audience if you're not a chess person, but the idea of deflection is that you want to get a piece away from attacking a certain square, right? So, like, if you push a pawn forward, you're not necessarily trying to promote it, but you may be trying to deflect another one of your enemy's pieces.
You can't attack my rook because my pawn if you do, my
It's
pawn's so close to
my
promotion
my
that
pawn
you
will
would
promote exactly and turn into a queen, and then you're fucked. That's
right.
the idea, and that's the same idea here. You know, like they just want the capabilities. And listen, this is the
Right, but
same.
the threat is the same, right? So I'm threatening you to upgrade a queen, upgrade to a queen, and even if I'm not active, like the threat is the same. Even if I don't actively now, if I actively have one, I guess the threat is more serious. But so like a threat from North Korea, who actually has the nuclear bomb already ready to go, even though it can only launch like 700 miles, like that's obviously a more serious threat than someone like Iran saying, "Hey, we're ready to make a nuclear weapon." Right? So I
Right.
guess the equivalence there is lost, but it's still like you are preparing to have a nuclear
Well,
weapon.
and the only reason that they've escalated their level of enrichment is because we pulled out of the deal that obligated them not to enrich. That's the
I
only
I
reason.
I just disagree. I think they were
Disagree
pursuing a
with
nuclear.
what?
I think they were pursuing a nuclear weapon just
So what
in for
evidence do you
like
have then?
600.
What evidence do you have that the Israelis, the
I
United
just
Nations, and U.S. intelligence does not have? Other than trust me, bro.
I mean so yeah, it's just trust me, bro.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Like so again, logically, I think it makes sense that they would pursue a nuclear weapon.
So wait.
Um,
Your entire strategy for Middle Eastern policy with Iran is not based on any evidence, not based on any statements, not based on any substantive finding. It's just conjecture and trust me, bro.
I mean, so if I was to say, it would be based on Israeli intelligence. Which I just said earlier in this interview, like it's dubious at best because we've relied on Israeli intelligence before and
Well
found it
then,
to be lacking.
how can you justify then, right? An American strike where God knows how much this is going to cost. Number one, and like I said, this is just the beginning of the war, and God knows how many interceptors we're going to have to use. Right? I don't know if you saw
Well,
this. We can only make 15 high capacity missile interceptors in a year. So God forbid we use them all up in this war, right? And then, Russia or China get lippy, right? Um,
so that might not be the case under Golden Dome. So now that Trump signed that executive order and we
we're
have a
just
one
now
trillion
starting.
dollar, I know we're just now starting. I know. I'm not saying I'm not saying that's not a valid point. Like if we can only make 15 interceptors a year, like that's rough. I don't know how many we had in a stockpile. I don't know. Just off the top of my head, I don't know how many Israel had. I think I do. Like I said, that going to become a real problem is that these interceptors are so expensive and take so long to produce that eventually, just by sheer numbers, it's the Russian strategy in World War II, except with bombs, right? Like you're just throwing cheap shit and they're having to spend $25 million a pop to shoot it down because otherwise, a massive civilian dies. Or they
Right.
hit your whatever the Israeli version of the Pentagon is. Um,
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I do.
It
I see the logic.
and plus, like, so here's the thing. Like, it'd be
I was
one
gonna
of
say, I
those. It would be one of those things if the United States came out and said, like, "Hey, I understand that Tulsi Gabbard said this in March, right? But we have new evidence we got from the UA or the IAEA or the Israelis or our own independent one, right? Here's the photographs, here's the evidence, here's everything we have." That's not what they said. They said we don't have any of that. Nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is now like our policy, and it's like how are you going to just? It's the same as Iraq.
so if they so it is that is a question. So again, my biggest evidence for them pursuing a nuclear weapon is again that 5.3 earthquake that happened underground just east of Tehran. And honestly, that is just a trust me, bro. So like no one's saying this is a nuclear weapon, and the fact that it's gone massively underreported is probably the best piece of evidence for me. So, like, when Iran's media is not playing up a 5.3 earthquake, because a 5.3 earthquake is not a joke, and it's only a couple miles east of Tehran. Like, this is something serious. If they're not playing it up, they're trying to hide or not playing it up. If they're not reporting it, it's sus to me. Like if there was a 5.3 level earthquake in, Podunk, Texas, we would probably hear about it. Much less if it was just, west of Washington, D.C.
Right, but to then go from like, okay, we have this earthquake and we have suspicions, but therefore now we're going to drop billions of dollars worth of bombs, risk however many billions worth of aircraft, a dozen or two pilots. And then we're gonna also go to regime change. God knows how long that'll take. Like the level of escalation. This is a big deal. Like this is going to
Yeah,
determine his presidency. This is
I,
this
I,
his whole legacy's on the line right now. I can't believe he took this risk.
right. And I think Trump is, if nothing else, a man who cares about his ego and his legacy. And I don't think he would have taken this risk without sufficient knowledge that this was the right move. But that's just a level of trust that I have in President Trump as someone who voted for him and someone who's seen these. So I like just to kind of eat my own foot here. I was really upset in that last podcast about how he was handling Iran. I was very upset with like going back to this like pay them to do what they're told mentality. And it turns out that that was never his plan to begin with, apparently.
Yeah,
Apparently
yeah,
he's
yeah.
been.
That's worse. That's worse.
I don't think so. I don't think
Because
for me it's better.
you were talking about how the Iranians were negotiating in bad faith. Well, how much more bad faith is it to, basically shit on your own negotiations in an attempt to get them to like loosen their guard just to kill some of their top officials? I mean, can you think of a worse incentive structure that is? How are people going to deal with us in the future if they're
Well, so
they're watching
Trump
this?
gave him 60. Trump gave him 60 days. That was the thing. So Trump said 60 days. We have 60 days to get a negotiation on the table signed and agreed to.
Dude, it
And
took
on day
two
61,
years. It took 2 fucking years to do the Iran deal. Okay, it took 2 fucking years.
I just don't see the problem with like say, hey, we gave you a 60-day timeline here. And I don't care that it took 2 years for the previous administration. Like I don't. I sincerely don't. You were either going to sign this deal or you were not. And it's on day 61 is when Israel conducted the first strikes. Like it's
Yeah, we were still supposed
Trump's
to
not playing
meet
about
with them.
like fall in line.
Yeah, and that diplomacy is ineffective, right? It hasn't, especially with the Iranians, right? I mean, we have two very clear compare and contrasts here. And it's just obvious to me that this is the worst way to go. I mean, how many American servicemen are at
I don't
risk
think
right
so.
now? How many, this is probably going to be way more expensive than just, even if you're right, if we were just paying them off, this is going to be way more expensive to do regime change.
Right. So, and again, on regime change, I'm kind of like iffy. One, just
What do you mean you're
historic.
ifty? You will absolutely
No,
support
no, no,
regime
no, no.
change. You will
Hang on.
absolutely support it.
Hang on. I will explain my reasoning. So, I'm iffy on regime change because historically, when we do regime change, they just, even if they come to the table being more pro-America or pro-Israel or whatever it is, they always inevitably end up as like these power-hungry dictators. So it happened with Al Qaeda specifically is probably the best example. Like we were funding Al Qaeda against the Russians, and we supported the regime change of oh fuck whatever his name is that escapes me at this. But
Syria?
we had funded it. Well, Syria, like every time we fund or support a regime change, it almost inevitably bites us in the ass. And that's why I'm more comfortable leaving Ayatollah in charge to sign a peace deal to be like, hey, look, all right, we're done. We're not gonna build nuclear sites, but beyond nuclear power. We're not gonna enrich uranium anymore. Like, fine, you've got what you wanted. The thing with diplomacy is on the other side of diplomacy, no matter what you're negotiating, is always the threat of force. So it's the same thing with like enforcing, like when a law is made in America, there is an underlying threat when a law is made. And the threat is like, we're going to put you in jail. Like there is a threat of force behind every diplomatic encounter. One of my big grievances with Obama, with some cases with George W. Bush, and with Biden is like when you draw these lines, when you put these lines in the sand and say, hey, do not cross this line or there will be enforcement, they inevitably just let people tramp all over the line. So when Trump says 60 days to make a deal, and then on day 61, the enforcement mechanism comes in, that's what I'm happy about. I am happy that a line was drawn in the sand and that line was crossed and and then action was taken. Like that is something that really hasn't happened from a
But
president
it
in my
sounds like
lifetime, specifically in the Middle East.
you don't even want a deal though, is what it sounds like. You don't want a deal because
No,
we had a deal. We had a deal.
I don't believe in paying people or
We
freeing
didn't.
up money or well, I say that. So Trump, a lot of like, so Trump's India and Pakistan, like getting them to kind of lay down their arms was economic. It's kind of there was another one too that I can't remember. Was it Saudi Arabia? Who was it that he made a deal like economic, like we're gonna basically open up America to your trade. You're gonna invest in us. We're gonna invest in you, yada yada yada. And I guess to some extent that's the same thing as
Because it
like making a
works.
nuclear deal, putting up sanctions.
It's a tremendous
But
strategy.
we were offering, even in the case like we were offering, Trump was offering that same kind of deal to Iran, and Iran said no. They
No,
were
well,
not agreeing to the deal.
the poison pill. Again, these negotiations were literally designed to fail on purpose, so we could do this. All
So
right.
why was it designed? How was it designed to fail on purpose if this was basically the same deal that Obama did?
It's
Like
not
this
the
was a
same
deal they
deal.
had
It's
already
not the
agreed to.
same deal. It's not the
How is
same
it?
deal.
How then explain to me how it's different.
Okay, number one, the Obama deal was a multinational deal. I mean, just listen to the amount of countries that signed on to the nuclear deal. Okay, so Iran, China, France, Germany, Russia, the UK, the US, and the rest of the EU all signed on to the nuclear deal to lift sanctions, and in return for denuclearization. So and then also, it made them sell 97% of their enriched uranium, which was at the time 97% is what they had above 5%, right?
Okay.
Um, this one was different. A, it was just us, and then B, um, they did not have to. They had to give up their entire civilian nuclear program, which they have a right to under international treaty. They just do. So, like, for the same thing, if you told Japan, like, hey, you can't have a civilian nuclear program for nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants, you can't have any of that, Japan would be like, no, we have a right under this treaty, right? Iran said the same thing. And so that was Trump's red line. He's like, no, 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 no nuclear power whatsoever, no nuclear power. And they're like, dude, we're going to run
No,
out of
you
oil.
saying you couldn't enrich the uranium. You
No, no,
saying
no,
you
no, no,
can't
no.
enrich the uranium in house.
Yeah, you can only purchase it. And they're like, no, 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 no. We have the right, as does every country within the UN. They have the power and the right. The big thing is the right
So
under treaty,
just out of curiosity, what treaty?
the non proliferation treaty, which is the treaty that
So
says you can enrich uranium but for civilian uses, but you cannot enrich for a nuclear bomb. which is the 90% mark.
Okay. So in that treaty, does it okay 80% enrichment?
Yes, I think the marker for it is 90%.
No, I mean, so that's kind of fucked.
The only thing
So
here's the thing the only member of the non-proliferation treaty is that is a member in good standing is Iran, right? Israel is the one that has a secret nuclear weapons program, right?
yeah, so that is the other thing too, is like Israel developed a nuclear weapon in secret, the same as Iran has, right? Like, so that's kind of the dirty secret that nobody's really talking about, is the same way. And so the same way that North Korea developed their bomb is the same way Israel's developed their bomb, is the same way that we're speculating Iran is developing their nuclear bomb. And I think the same way Pakistan too. I think it may have been Pakistan.
Right. And well, and I guess here's my thing. So like given the amount of countries that signed on to the Iran deal, right? It, there was no scenario where we get Iran, China, and Russia, just those three, to agree on anything, right? With the U.S., there's just no way. That's why it was such a consequential thing when he pulled out. And I understand that we're here now, and we can't change that. But like the idea that like okay, his supporters loved when he pulled out of that. The idea that you're going to get a greater deal than that was just it's just a fantasy. I don't know what to tell people.
I mean, so the only thing I could hope for is that we would get more of a guarantee. So, like we know you're not going to enrich beyond this percent because we have eliminated your capacity to do so. Right. So Obama didn't come in, make this deal, and then bomb their nuclear storehouses. Like apparently he bought them.
Right.
If you're
Exactly.
correct, and I'm going to assume you are. Um, but we have eliminated them in a different manner. We did not pay you to buy this uranium off you. We have just eliminated the capacity.
Yeah, I mean, hey, and we'll find out if we did, right? Because I
Yeah, I mean,
guarantee
we're
you, I
gonna
mean,
find out because
Israel wants regime change, right? So even if they have to lie, they will to say
so
like,
is
hey, we didn't get it all. They've actually moved it to another super secret mountain base, right? We
well, and so we've actually seen some of that already happening. So, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, like Israel is more skeptical than the U.S. specifically. And maybe they did move, but we hit at least every underground facility that we know of was bombed heavily by these. Now they might have one that we didn't know of. I find that dubious. Just I don't know. I don't know. Like it takes a lot to hide something when satellites can count the gnats on a fly's ass from space. You know, and we've got, we can detect radiation from space. We can like, so if they were moving this stuff, at least above ground, we would know that they moved this stuff. Uh, to say it's impossible would be inaccurate, but I am hoping against hope that this is the end of this. Iran does not seem to think so. Israel doesn't seem to think so. We'll see how their proxies act. We'll see what kind of escalation or deal comes out of this. I was going to say, what I'm really hoping to see is an Iran that is more conducive and less expansionist
expansionist.
than
What do
we
you
have for the
mean?
past year.
What do you mean expansionist?
Less funding of proxy forces in other nations. So perhaps not explicitly expansionist, but less influential in the Middle East.
I gotcha. So you're saying like in an ideal world, they would be either like a failed state or they would just be like a shell of their former self.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily want them to be a failed state. I think the more economic force we can add, especially because Iran controls so much of the world's oil flow. Um, I don't want to see them be a failed state. I don't want to see their people suffer unnecessarily. I do want to see them fall in line with Western hegemony. So like the entirety of the G7 supports what Israel's done. The entire like we're talking like Canada, Germany, like big nations that have been very critical of Israel during the Hamas war, um, have outright condemned Israel. Like these aren't people who just unilaterally support the actions of Israel, but everybody has come out in support of them doing this with Iran. So it's not like the US is the only person here. Um, I just want to see them fall in line with Western hegemony or US hegemony, as you very accurately
Yeah,
pointed
so
out.
so what
Like
does that look like then though? They just get rid of their nuclear program? That is that it?
just act right. Stop funding terror proxies. And eventually, one of the best ways I can put this is like act like a big boy, and maybe we can give you big boy toys.
Okay, but like so you keep mentioning that they fund terror proxies. Like we fund terror proxies, right?
Right, and I would say that's a poor strategy. Like that has always ended poorly for the United States. I
Right.
don't
So
think we
for
should be.
us it's a poor strategy, but for them we have to bomb the shit out of their country.
Yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
got you. Okay, I
So
just want to
like,
make
and
sure
I
I
mean,
had that right.
and if you want, like, if and Iran might bomb other countries. So fortunately, they don't have the weapons necessary unless they get them from China or Russia to actually attack the mainland U.S. But I do think that retaliating against U.S. forces in the Middle East is going to be, especially with President Trump, like I think that's going to be a big clusterfuck for you. Um, right now, we have only attacked facilities that are relevant to what we are trying to eliminate. Right? You don't want to turn this into an open war.
No, no,
Like this
no, no,
isn't
no,
this
no.
isn't the
They
Obama
don't.
administration.
This is the part you're missing. They don't want open war. We are actively starting open war. What would you call?
Why didn't they sign the deal then? Sign the fucking deal when Trump put it on the table
So
and gave you
that's the deal.
60 days.
Sign the deal or else. That's your diplomacy.
Okay, so that's always the
That's
deal. That
no,
is always
no, no,
the
no, 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 no,
diplomatic.
no, 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 no. No,
Yes,
it's not.
yes, it is.
No, it's not.
100%.
It wasn't with
100%.
Obama. It wasn't with Obama. You know what they asked? You know what the Obama administration did? It's called their fucking job. It's called diplomacy. It's called governing. All right. It wasn't, hey, if you don't sign this deal within 60 days, we're going to wipe you off the map. No, I mean, this is something out of a fucking
We're not
video game.
threatening to wipe. We're not.
This is something elementary school kids could figure out. And you're telling me that, like, if, what, we're going to do this or else? Like, we're
Yeah,
supposed to
that
be
is
grown-ups.
always
We're
the threat
supposed
of
to be
diplomacy. It's the
adults.
same thing. It's that is always the threat. So when you tell a child, "Hey, don't do this," there is always an or else on the other side of that. That this is not new to diplomacy is the threat of the stick. There is a stick on it. And the problem with modern US presidents
No, no, no.
is
It's
that they draw
carrot
the line in
or
the
the
sand and
stick.
they have
It's
repeatedly not used the stick.
that is just so not true. I don't know where you're getting
That
this.
is true. It's
This is so
100% true.
we have
100%.
we have every single presidential administration of my lifetime has done regime change of some sort. What is this made up fantasy land you live in where George Bush didn't overthrow
Uh,
Iraq, where Obama didn't overthrow Libya, and and
no,
where
no, no, so,
and Biden
the
didn't overthrow Syria, right? What fantasy land do you live where Trump didn't allow them
so
to take Hong Kong? Like what?
how did Biden? Well, yeah, okay. So that was again. I stated my opinion on Hong Kong. I think it was super fucked. But are you going to deny that there have been red lines drawn in the sand by previous administrations that were then just totally ignored?
No, I'm sure that they were, but they were an explicit red line. Explicit. So in other words, like so Hillary Clinton is the big one. All right, where it's like this is a no-fly zone, you fly in here, we're shooting it down. And then they fly in there, they don't shoot it down. All right? That's not what we're talking about. Trump did not say, right? I just want to get a concession out of you. Trump did not say if we don't have a deal at the end of this 60 days, we're going to bomb your nuclear facilities. Did he say that?
No, so he didn't say explicitly we're going to bomb your nuclear facilities, but he did like very well say like there anything could happen. Like there's no option off the table. This is repeated by Trump in the 60 days up to this, and then even repeated after this when it says, "Hey, sign a deal or bad things are going to happen." Like this is every press conference with regards to Iran. It has been like, "Hey, you need to sign a deal or bad shit's going to happen, guys." And they
Huh.
didn't sign a deal, and then bad shit happened, and you're like, "Fucking, what are you going to be shocked?" Like you
No,
gonna
no, no, no.
like
That's
so?
the thing. No, 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 no. I have been predicting this since he got elected in November. Okay, don't act like I'm the one that's shocked
Oh
here.
no 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 no
It's
no.
it's
So
his
that
dumbass
statement.
supporters who are shocked, right? I don't know if you're looking at Twitter right now. half of MAGA is in a fucking frenzy right now because they were like, dude, this is not what we fucking elected you for. We elected you to stop this forever war bullshit. And I
So
understand
I
that there are neocons that love this shit. They think that we have to do this so that way Jesus can come back. But those people are the same illiterate savages who led us into the other 20 years of wars. All right?
so I'm not saying you in particular did not see this coming. Okay. I am saying the people still like Marjorie Taylor Greene, or there was another prominent one that I can't really remember off the top of my head. But like, so if JD Vance was to come out and be like, I'm totally shocked by Trump's approach to foreign policy and with in regards to Iran, I would say like, where the fuck have you been? And like for the MAGA people who are, and I don't see that. I don't like everyone I've talked to who voted for Trump, but we live in the reddest state of the union, is pretty well in support of like good, like this needed to happen. You drew a red line, they didn't abide by it. You're given now. Um, Maybe there are some people who are just like, well, I thought Trump was going to be totally isolationist. Then you weren't paying attention. You were not paying, not even like before. So, and Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire like talks about this too. Like, if you're shocked by this, you were not paying attention to not even just Trump's political life since 2015, but prior. He was coming out with like, you can't let Iran have a nuclear bomb. You can't make this deal. You can't do, yada yada yada. This is not. This should not be a shock
Right.
to anyone who is actually aware of what Trump's foreign policy stance was
Well, I mean, just to give you a couple of names, like I'm not,
for his
this is
life.
not, right, right. No, Trump has been like very, honestly, like consistent on this issue on who can and who can't have a nuclear bomb. And Iran's not one of them, right? But the idea that we're going to go
Right.
in, strike Iran, do regime change, and escalate this to a war. I mean, like Charlie Kirk is against this. Matt Walsh is against this. The Hodge twins are against this. Like, this is not. These are not like Joe Rogan's against all this shit, which I know he's not like super MAGA, but I mean he counts, right? I mean he supported him, but
Right.
this
You, you,
this
can't, you can't lump together people like Matt Walsh and then Joe Rogan. Like these are not the same individuals, but yeah.
well, I'm saying that like so MAGA is now a big
I mean,
tent,
so
like the amount of people that are in MAGA is huge, and no, they didn't vote for this, all right? They've and this is the part that's going to suck. If we do go to full scale war, the deportations, but almost by necessity, have to go to the back burner because as important as deportations are, they're not nearly as important as a war. Like, and that's what Charlie Kirk and that's what Matt Walsh and them
I
are
don't know.
saying.
So
They're like, listen, we
I
can't
don't know.
focus on both. We cannot. There's only so many resources.
See, and I don't know that I don't know that you can't focus on domestic policy with domestic forces. So ICE being a domestic force, they're not going to be deployed to the Middle East. Um, I don't know that you can't handle the deportations and open war with Iran. I really do hope that this doesn't escalate into open war.
Well,
Um,
so you got to think of it like this too. So like Bush, when Bush came in, right? He was going to solve Social Security. He was going to solve entire that. So like that. So Trump got elected mostly on the border. Like that was his big thing, or at least one of his big things, right? So when Bush got elected, it was Social Security and entitlements, like other like welfare and shit. And then 9/11 happened. So guess what didn't get touched or fixed at all? Like and the
right.
same thing's going to happen to Trump. Like you said, they're not going to deploy ICE agents to the Middle East, but like the amount of funding they're going to get is probably going to be like the additional 50 or 60 billion that they're getting is probably gone now. They're already talking about it in the Senate because we're gonna have to fund this fucking war. Like um, they just we have United States Marines on the border right now. And can they stay there? Like we don't know. We don't know.
Well, and so it also depends on what kind of war we're talking about. So, like, are we talking a full ground incursion like we did into Iraq and Afghanistan? Are we talking about just strictly like we're gonna air bomb you, like just air raids? Um, I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. I really don't. It is a question of self-interest and human nature. And I cannot predict. There are too many factors at play. At least someone like me to like, is Iran going to make a deal now? Are they going to escalate? Like I said, from at least their Twitter posts, they seem fully ready to escalate to attack military bases in the Middle East, to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which I think again it would at least be the easiest thing to pretty much open up. Um, but we don't know. We don't know how this is going to go, and That's I think the scary part for a lot of people, especially like you said in the MAGA group. These people, like if this is a quick war, if this is like so, if, just theoretically, if Iran comes to the table and makes a deal tomorrow, right? Then I think a lot of people in the like Marjorie Taylor Greene or this other MAGA movement that are like isolationist, uh, they're going to be eating their own words, right? Or in 10 years, we could still be at war with Iran, and people are like, "Wow, this was a biggest clusterfuck since you know." And like you mentioned earlier, this is a big threat to Trump's legacy. Like if he spends forever in this war, it is going to damn his as much as Iraq and Afghanistan did Bush. You know, Bush had a lot of lofty goals and did a lot of good and a lot of bad with things like the Patriot Act, but like it's up in the air. Like there's no real predicting it until something comes to the table. And that's where I think a lot of people are like, it's just rash speculation right now. 100%. Like, well, this is going to be another 15-year war. And speculation can be based on historical evidence, but it's still speculation because you can't see the future, right? So anything I say regards to the future is speculation. Anything you say, anything the Secretary of Defense says, this is all it's so fucking crazy. Um, and I at least consent or not consent. Well, yeah, okay. So I consent to the fact that people who voted for Trump wanted less fucking crazy, right? Like that was a big portion of this was like we want less inflation, we want immigration under control, and we want this fucking crazy shit to stop. And this is not that. This is not the crazy shit stopping because there is no telling where this ends up.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, this is business as usual, which I think the neocon faction definitely, it's like Ben Shapiro is probably, creaming in his pants over this. This is exactly what he voted for. We're not going to deal with anything domestically. We're going to give Israel whatever they want, and we're going to try and do some sort of regime change in Iran. I mean, that's what else could he ask for? Like, um, but I think that the MAGA faction is bigger than that now. And I am going to be curious to watch, like you said, as this develops, how is this going to unravel the base? Matt Walsh is never going to, denounce Trump, right? That's not going to happen. Neither is Charlie Kirk. The Republican National Convention pays these people. Like they're not going to come out against Donald Trump, but they might be critical, more critical than they otherwise would have been.
Right, at least in regards to this one action. And so like you got the same thing with like Bush's base post 9/11 is like you got people who were just wholeheartedly supporting him and then people who, when he did the Patriot Act were like, "Whoa, hang on." Like so a lot of the middle ground people and maybe even some of the actual base. I haven't seen have you seen Trump's approval numbers since the attack?
No, we won't know for another week or two until all this
Yeah. So
unravels.
it'll be interesting to see. Um, and we do have elections coming up next year. Like for Senate, like this could be really affecting to your presidency. You're going to have to, and I think Trump is the guy. Trump is the guy who's going to be like, look, um, this is really like people don't like this, so I'm going to do what I have to get it resolved immediately, tomorrow. But it's not just Trump at this table, man. Like that's the thing, and so it does reassure me that it seems like Iran is very, very short on allies. I know, at least the only other nuclear power that said if they acted they would retaliate was Pakistan. But I mean, frankly, we just got done with an India-Pakistan thing. Like it was war. Like it only lasted like a week. But I there are situations where this could very easily devolve into something that is terrible,
Right. And
right?
and and
Like
so
that's not
knowing
hard to
that,
see. That's not hard to speculate about.
right, and so knowing that, you still are like, yeah, this was great, actually. This is a great idea to do.
I still think this was the right move. And the reason is because I see equally detrimental effects coming from the development of an Iranian nuclear weapon. Like
Right. That we
I
have
see
no
that very
evidence
easily
for, right?
sliding downhill as well.
Right. This weapon,
Also,
you may as
again, I would
well
not say it's no
you
evidence. I think it's logical. It is a logical understanding of what's been
what
going
do you
on
mean you
for the
wouldn't say
past eight
no
years.
evidence? What do you mean you would say no evidence? You admitted
They
yourself that there's
expanded.
no
They
evidence.
expanded their. They expanded their nuclear enrichment program. They expanded their ballistic missile program. I don't understand why you would do that if you're not preparing to make a nuclear weapon, or at least, like you admitted, getting to a stage where you could easily develop one, right?
Right.
And I think that that capacity is not something that Iran should have. And if Iran does have that capacity, it changes the game. Once you have a nuclear weapon,
Trump
you are in a
gave
different
them the
class of country.
capacity. Trump gave them the
I don't think
capacity.
so. I think even
What do you
under the
mean you
Obama
don't think
deal,
so? What do you mean you
even under
don't
the
think
Obama
so?
deal, I am explaining, even under the Obama deal, they were developing enriched uranium at least and expanding their ballistic missile program while denying UN oversight to their places like Fordow.
No,
Like this is
false.
not,
All of this is
yes, no,
false.
100%. Okay, tell you what, Google it. Google it right now.
I'm actually
So
looking
it's
at a
funny.
CNN. I'm actually looking at a CNN article that actually has the monitored amount of enriched uranium, and it is actually a strong decline until Trump pulls out, and then you see the rapid increase. So, how do you explain that?
So this is an article from 2015. Under the JCPOA, Iran and the IAEA are required to drop a list of declared nuclear facilities, but Iranian deal limits inspectors' access to suspicious sites. So it only gave them access to declared nuclear facilities.
Which included the whole reason they started the JCPOA was because they found Fordow. They were like, oh shit, you know, we have very clear pre 2019, right? The amount of enriched uranium, right? 149 kilograms, all of it's under 4%. Very clear, right? And then Trump pulls out, and then you see them start enriching because they're no longer, obligated by treaty, right? So I mean, this all of this makes total sense to me. So pre
I, I
2019,
I would suspect. So these you have to
you would
understand that all these numbers are
suspect.
known levels. Yeah, I said all these. So
How would
again,
you
I
know
I've been
unknown
very
levels?
open.
How would you know unknown levels?
That's the thing. So they start. That's the thing. You can't know unknown levels. They are unknown.
Oh, well, then you
So
may
if
as
they
well
had
just say
other
that there's a
facilities
billion.
or other store, well, you could. I mean, in theory, and just have like zero evidence other than it makes logical sense because you're expanding your programs.
You
Like
understand?
that's the thing.
Just because it makes logical sense doesn't mean it's true. So you understand, like logical sense means that like each step follows one another, but that doesn't mean
Right.
it's definitively true, right?
Right. I do understand that. Like I'm not.
I
I
don't think
again.
you do. I don't think you
Okay.
do. I just
I
don't
think
understand
that the
how
rapid
we can be
expansion of their
truthful.
I think that the rapid expansion of their ballistic program, the rapid expansion of their nuclear enrichment program, all indicates a willingness to work towards a nuclear weapon. And I think they have plenty of reason to want a nuclear weapon, like just for their own self-interest. Once you get a nuclear weapon, it changes the game. You are a different tier of country in the world when you have a nuclear weapon, right? We can all agree on that, right?
Sure, right, absolutely.
Do you think Iran has a desire to be in that tier group of countries?
Absolutely not. And that's
You
again,
don't.
that is
Why?
consistent with US military and intelligence doctrine since 2003 and United Nations doctrine since 2013. That is not
Yeah,
my
just
analysis. That is not my analysis. That is United States State Department intelligence community and military intelligence analysis since 2003.
yeah. I just don't buy it.
You
I
don't buy
don't buy
them.
that Iran doesn't want to be a nuclear power.
Okay, right. And that is based on, again,
Their
trust me,
own
bro.
self-interest, their own self. I mean, so again, I think it's logical, and you can disagree with me. That's fine, but I think it is logical that Iran wants to be a nuclear power, especially considering that Israel is a nuclear power. Like that is their main combatant, right? Well, I mean, so kind of. It's their main combatant in their region is Israel. So if Israel has a nuclear weapon, Iran naturally wants to have a nuclear weapon. Otherwise, they are not in the same tier group. And we've seen that from the first week of strikes. They have just gotten the shit blown out of them.
If they
Like,
wanted a nuclear weapon, they would have never signed the Iran deal that gave
or
up
they would have
90.
signed,
Hold on,
or they
hold
would
on.
have signed
They,
the Iran deal and then just keep doing it in places that the UN didn't know about.
so wait. I just want to be clear here. So in the Iran deal, they gave up 97% of their enriched uranium, which would have taken them 15 years to reproduce, right? They actually still haven't reproduced what they had pre-Iran deal. So if they wanted a nuclear bomb and that's their end goal and they want to be in that second tier, remember, they got to be in that second tier, right? The same with tier as Israel. We got to remember that. It's logical. It's logical. Um, but what I'm saying is if that's what they want, why would they give up? I don't know the means to do it, and
Because they
it delayed
already
them
have
over a
uranium
decade.
mines. So in the
Yeah, but
in
it
the
delays them a
meantime, under
decade.
the
But they want that second tier, so why would they wait a decade?
because they still needed to expand their ballistic missile program to even be able to launch nuclear weapons anyway,
When did they start
which
expanding
they then
their
focused
missile
on under
program?
the JCPOA. Under the JCPOA,
Well, the JCPOA didn't have anything to do with
they
missile.
took the money that the U.S. paid them, and that was freed up based on by the removal of sanctions to fund their ballistic missile expansion.
Because that's something that I haven't
I
even
mean, so I
heard
might be
from the
wrong.
mainstream guys. That's something I haven't even. That's the only reason I'm asking. I haven't even heard that from the mainstream guys. They're not even claiming that.
So
And by the way, and as
when the JCPOA entered, it was pretty commonplace that the money was going to go to either terrorism or an expansion of the Iranian military. So this was over a decade ago. This is why I can't remember.
okay, well, I mean, I
And we
listen.
can
I
see that
suppose that's fair.
we
Um,
can see that they expanded now, and so you could even logically say, well, if they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, they have to have some kind of defensive force, right? So of course they expand their ballistic missile program because that's the alternative to a nuclear weapon, right? Also, it can just so happen to be used in tandem with nuclear warheads.
how far away do you think that they are from a nuclear warhead?
Well, so if
Pre uh,
the
pre
five,
pre strike, pre strike, pre the bombing
so
of their.
so pre-strike with enriched uranium up to 80%, or let's call it 75. We'll split the difference. 75% levels. From my understanding, I am not a nuclear scientist, so from what people tell me, it is very easy to go from 75% to weapons grade material. They could have produced a nuclear weapon in a matter of weeks.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
God,
Well, and
you're
so again, I would cite this 5.3 level earthquake that happened just outside of Tehran that went massively underreported. That I I think was an underground detonation of a nuclear weapon.
right, but you don't have proof that it's a.
No, I no, I
And just to
don't.
be clear, the United States is not even offering that as evidence, right?
Yeah, so far nobody that I've seen online has like even been reporting on this earthquake.
Gotcha.
So I don't know what's going on. And it's for me, if and I don't know for 100% that it's true. So I could be very well wrong, and then maybe I'm just totally flawed. Let me see. Let me just Google it real quick.
Do you even know to a 10% certainty? Like, no. The obvious answer is no. This is less than a 1% chance that you're right on this, right? Like,
So this is from the New York. This is the New York Times, and there 2 days ago there was a 5.3 to 5.1 level earthquake near Tehran. So this is like the earthquake, at least for sure happened. Now, whether or not it was actually a nuclear detonation, I will say there's no fault lines there. There's no, but we have earthquakes in Oklahoma. We don't have fault lines. Could there be other reasons? Yes. Could it also be the underground testing of a nuclear weapon? Yes.
right, but here's my thing. In order to say that, right? I mean, it could have been, God just wanted to shake the floor. It could have been fairies underground in the underworld, right? But in order to say any of those things, you have to have evidence, right? And I just want to be clear, evidence points towards a singular conclusion, right?
And I would say so. Right. I would say that if they have evidence, I find it very coincidental that was 2 days ago, and then we're conducting these strikes when Trump himself said that there was a 2 week time frame. Um, I would imagine that he has some evidence, and maybe I don't know, but I can't even speculate on it. If I'm going to be honest with you, if whatever evidence we have, the U.S. government has of Iran either developing a nuclear weapon currently or testing a nuclear weapon, whatever this is, you need to be forthcoming with it because you are going to have to defend your actions to the American people.
Right, but
There are
even
a
if
lot
they're
of people.
not, you're just going to support them anyway because you trust them, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. Like Ben Shapiro and, people that support this, they're just going to whatever Trump decides to do. And he doesn't have to explain anything because people will just say, "Well, I trust him. I voted for him." I mean, that's that.
I do trust President Donald Trump's judgment and his actions. I do, and that might be foolhardy of me. I mean, so and time will tell. Time will tell. Like, well, you shouldn't have trusted that guy because he was lying out his ass.
Right,
Like
but by that
I may
time
have
it'll
to
be
eat.
too late, right? There will be no consequences for him being wrong or lying to you.
There
Just like
won't
there
because he'll
wasn't
probably be
for
out of
Bush.
office. But,
Just like
right,
there
because he was
wasn't for
already out of.
Bush.
He was
Right.
in his second term. It was already out of office. And so like, is there a possibility that Trump has just been on the fuck Iran train for 40 years? Which, again, based on his public statements, he has been like very anti-Iran. Maybe he's just like, this is my moment. They can't do anything about it. So here we go. That could be the case. Or it could be the case that he's got shit that we just don't know about. and he's acting on it. Now, why they wouldn't be forthcoming with that evidence, I could not tell you. Like I could definitely see like if they had the evidence, they would show us the evidence.
Right, especially
Because
Donald
then
Trump, right?
right, so he would be like, and maybe they're going to. But so Pete Hegseth's interview this morning did not go into detail about like, yes, we know for sure they had a nuclear weapon.
Well, if
Like,
anything, no. If anything, they've doubled down. So, like I said, Marco Rubio, right, Secretary of State, said today, this morning, they said, "Hey, just to be clear, do you guys have new intelligence that said that there's, pursuing a nuclear bomb before the strike?" And Marco Rubio's entire point was that that's irrelevant. And then the lady pushed back and said, like, no, it's not. It is what's relevant actually. And
yeah,
Marco
it is
Rubio
completely
just
relevant.
double. And Marco Rubio said, no, it's not. No, it's not. Now he would never say that. Yes, we have new intelligence, and here's the new intelligence. He never said that. He just was refusing to answer. And you know, I don't know
Which
how
means
to
to me,
tell
like,
people
that
this.
tells me that if they have evidence, they haven't confirmed it, right? So if they have an inclination, they have not themselves confirmed it, which maybe like means Mossad is saying like, hey, um,
Well,
this is it. This is what it was.
somehow that would be worse, right? Because then you're saying that they have intelligence, they haven't confirmed it, but they did go ahead and order a strike to an escalatory strike that might be illegal. I mean, I do eventually want to move on and ask about like what's your like if we do go regime change here, do you think that he needs approval from Congress to go to war, like full scale boots on the ground escalation?
Like in principle, yes. Um, in practice, no. And no president since H.W. Bush has actually had congressional approval. Well, Bush did.
Yeah, Bush
I
did
take that back.
for Iraq and
We've
Afghanistan.
Yeah, we've had plenty of military incursions. So like in principle, yes, I would say that he needs like no, you need congressional approval to go to war. And frankly, just based on the numbers, he's not going to get it. So for a boots on the ground invasion, I don't think he actually like
Oh, I'd be
so I don't think
shocked.
he
I bet he
needs
would get it. I'm sure he'd get it.
I don't think so.
There'd be a shocking. There,
There's
I
too many dissenters. Like and then there are Republican obstructionists who like just might be wanting vengeance for this big bill that he's passing. Like they're the typical watchdogs, the people who are more isolationist, and then there's budget hawks. Like, I don't think he would get the numbers for a full congressional war. Um, Now, does he need congressional approval to conduct military strikes? I don't know. So, in
so it's the
principle,
same thing. In principle, yes, but in practice, absolutely not. Same thing.
yeah, and so that's not a reflection like on what
And
I
that's not
believe that he
just
should
Trump,
get
by the
approval.
way. Like
Yeah,
Obama is
that's
guilty of the same thing.
right. And so, like in principle, I would say yes, he does in fact need congressional approval. Whether like a singular airstrike needs approval, I would probably say no. Like the president does have some free reign here, um, but it's like an actual boots on the ground incursion into Iran would definitely, in my book, need military approval, and I would not support him doing that without congressional approval. Like you have to get a congressional issue of war to do that,
Okay,
right?
if he
And that
did
that
that,
is
okay.
that does seem to be the consensus of prior presidents too. So even like Obama's airstrikes, these were not congressionally approved, but he wasn't also sending like military people to my recollection anyway.
Yeah, I think by the time Obama got there, the boots on the ground were already there for the most part, outside of the airstrikes. But my question is this: so, like, if Trump does, and this is totally hypothetical, totally speculation, but if Trump does go boots on the ground without Congress, would you call for his impeachment?
Uh, yeah, probably. Like that's not a power. I am deeply discomforted by the amount of power we've left the executive branch in the last 40 years, frankly. And the ability to declare war, I'm not here for that. Like you can't just go to open warfare and then like I said, airstrikes might be a different thing. Obviously, defending yourself, so defending military bases. So if let's say a proxy group in Iraq attacks a U.S. military base, the soldiers stay within the military base and defend themselves. That is not war, right? That is defending yourself. Shooting
Right,
down
right.
missiles that are aimed at boats. That's not. But if we're going to send like a full, let's say, 5,000 groups into Iran to overthrow this regime, that is boots on the ground warfare, and you do not have the power of the president as the president to do that.
Right. I mean, even Bush got approval from Congress to go to Iraq and Afghanistan and all that, right? Um, it just killed his presidency. Like fighting to get the support to go for war. I think in theory, I don't even think Trump wants to go to boots on the ground war. I think like you said,
Yeah,
it's the competing players around him and Netanyahu for that matter that want the regime change. And Trump hope
I don't even
go ahead.
I don't even know that. I was going to say, I don't even know that Israel is really interested in boots on the ground war occupation of Iran. I mean, I don't think they have the military strength to do it. They saw what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't think really anyone's got the willpower to try and occupy a place like Iran. If we had so much trouble fighting guerrilla forces in the Middle East before, nothing about Iran is going to make that easier.
Yeah, well, Iran's a
Right.
country
And
of
why would it?
90 million people. You know what I
Right. And
mean?
like why would you, even if you have a conventional army, like a uniformed army, why would you maintain that status quo when you know it would be less effective? Right. So why would you not just divert to a guerrilla style warfare that has been effective in the Middle East for centuries? This it's not complicated. But I don't know that anyone actually has an interest in boots on the ground occupation of Iran. I think they would, if they were going to do
Israel
regime change,
does.
they would take out the out. I don't think they have a desire to occupy Iran. I really don't. Um,
Well,
Now I
they
could be
don't
wrong.
want to occupy it. They want us to occupy it, right?
Yeah, well, so maybe I guess, but
Just like we're
I
doing
would
with Iraq right
I don't.
now. You know, we're occupying Iraq right now.
Well, so we
Um,
have U.S. military bases, but we're not like occupying for like stabilization of the regime. Well, I don't know. Maybe we are. Like
yeah,
we're not
absolutely.
actively fighting guerrilla. Are we actively fighting guerrilla forces in Iraq or
No,
Afghanistan
no, no,
right
no,
now?
no, no, no. We're just occupying Iraq.
Well, so having military bases. Okay, so is having a military like do we occupy Germany? You know what I'm saying? And I guess the difference there is Germany is an allied nation, whereas Iraq is not by just consensus. But
Right.
um, I mean, so putting military bases in Iran like an actual occupation, I don't not probably not without the agreement of the regime would be my thing. I could see the benefit. Like, look, we're going to be here because we're going to watch this new administration. Like, we are going to have watchdogs in country. Do I think that's the is it the safest? Probably. This is assuming a regime change. Probably, but frankly, U.S. occupation has not prevented the rise of these rebel forces in other countries. So we occupied Syria. We do not stop the Assad overthrow. You know what I'm saying? We just have bases there.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about putting if we wanted to put a base in Iran. I think that's risky. And I don't know what actual benefit it provides, especially because we've got we've got what is it, three carriers now, aircraft carriers near Iran. Like I don't think there's a need for a base. We have bases that float, and like one of these
Right.
carriers could probably topple Iran. Like this isn't, and three of them would just be overkill.
Well, no, 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 no. I actually disagree with that. And this is what I was curious about as well. I was like, well, would we even have to go boots on the ground to topple the regime? And the consensus appears to be yes, because even like during Iraq, so this is crazy to think about, but we actually dropped more bombs on Iraq in 10 days during the air campaign than all of World War II. Think about how crazy of a stat that is, right?
Right.
And it did not overthrow the regime in Iran. It requires boots on the ground. You have to have Marines going down, knocking down fucking doors, getting bad guys. You just have to. It's a necessity
Well,
of
and to me,
regime change.
to me that's an argument against regime change as a goal of this conflict. Which again, I'm not pro regime change right now. I think I've tried to say that a couple times here, and my main reasoning is we want Ayatollah to sign the deal. So if you put in a puppet, and which has typically happened in history, like we put in a puppet ruler or somebody who's very pro, and we get them to sign the deal. Well, the problem is there's still millions of people who were like, no, fuck this guy, right? So
Right.
it happened in the pullout. Was it the Afghanistan pullout under Biden? I think it was. It happened like we established a regime in Afghanistan, and then we pulled out, and that regime immediately crumbled, like because it did not have the support of the people. And that to me is the best argument to keep Ayatollah alive and against regime change. We need Ayatollah's submission. And even then, even with his submission, there is a good chance the Iranian people, if they're feeling strong-willed enough, will just overthrow him themselves and put somebody in who, isn't as broken as the Ayatollah is right now.
I'd be
Uh,
shocked. I mean, it's been the U.S. strategy for the past, I guess it'd be 40 something years now that, listen, we're just gonna sanction the fuck out of them, make their life a living hell to the point where the people, uh, like overthrow their government. And that's a bad strategy. And recently we've actually learned that that's probably not going to work. And the reason is this. So like after 9/11, what happened on like 9/12, right? Like Democrats, Republicans, Christians, atheists, Jews, they all kind of came together and rallied around the flag, right? That's what they call
right.
this in them big universities. The same effect apparently is probably happening in Iran. Is that like the brutal nature of existence may actually strengthen a regime. It's what's happening in North Korea right now. Um,
Yeah, so North Korea is a little bit weird because like we're not bombing North Korea. Like North Koreans are just suffering and they're just being fed nothing but lies. They have no alternate information, which is also like so I know that Iran's really restricted internet access in Iran to the people. The only thing that I think is different here is that prior to this war, at least, that the Ayatollah had a really low approval rating, at least from the people. Now, does the question is, does this strengthen their resolve and belief in an Ayatollah, or does this actually stir an uprising for them to put somebody in who's not going to make their lives so difficult, right? And like I said, I could see it going both ways. And historically, at least, it does really codify a support base when you're under attack because you have a common enemy now. Like the
mhm.
common enemy is like so even people who were kind of milk toast on Israel in Iran. So they're like, look, I don't care about Israel. I don't really want to go to war with them. Like that, it's not our fucking problem right now. Let's focus on making our lives better, right? Now they're like, well, fuck, Israel's bombing the shit out of us, and they're bombing our nuclear power stations. Like this was going to provide cheap and almost free electricity for us, and really increase our economy because we can sell all of our oil because we're not relying on our own oil use for power. Like I can really see it codifying a regime. And we'll just have to see what happens. We'll see how Ayatollah's base reacts, how the people of Iran act. Uh, and I would probably agree with you that at least historically that doesn't typically go in the way the U.S. wants it to.
Yeah. I think the most likely one, and this, I'm bad about predictions. I'm not. I think speculation tends to be like the lowest form of argumentation. Just in my opinion. And I think that the most realistic one, as terms of retaliation, though, is that they close the Strait of Hormuz. I think that's kind of their avenue, and because it also it most likely prevents like it's like if you strike a U.S. base in Iraq, like Donald Trump will fuck up your entire existence, right? He's not the dude you want to
Right.
fuck around with on this. But if you just close the Strait of Hormuz and you just start shooting down oil tankers, I feel like that somehow is way less significant than striking U.S. bases. So,
I don't.
um,
So the problem with if you attack U.S. bases, you're going to really piss off Donald Trump. But if you shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like 25 to 35% of the world's oil comes to
yeah,
the Strait of
right,
Hormuz.
right.
I mean, so the Iranians tried this before, and we absolutely fucking decimated them. So I would say both of these are incredibly losing strategies for Iran. And so again, if you attack U.S. bases, you're only pissing off Donald Trump. If you shut down the Strait of Hormuz, you're pissing off the entirety of NATO. So like we're not the only people who occupy and try to police this strait. Like so, I think we have British, UK vessels there. I think France, like, and this was all to like they were there to monitor the Houthis and keep it from them bombing boats and tankers and stuff. So the assets are already there. I think really the only thing the only thing that's going to be beneficial for everybody involved is just ending this now, saying no, we're done. We're going to sign whatever deal is on the table. We're not going to shut down the strait. We're not going to attack U.S. bases. We're done. Okay, this is it. What is the likelihood of that happening? I don't know. Has Ayatollah had enough punishment to actually just to unconditional surrender? Um, I don't know yet. That's entirely up to him, man. and the Iranian people. The Iranian people may not let him. You know, so again, speaking to this codifying a regime, like if he comes out now and says, "Look, we're just done. We're done. We're signing a deal." The people may be so pissed off at this point they'd be like, "The fuck you are." Like if you just roll over now, we're going to replace you with someone who won't roll over. Like it could totally go 180 on us. And it is just there is no predicting what's going to happen. Um, even if we were to take polls, you know, they fuck all polls. Like ask Hillary Clinton how polls work out. You know, um, it's a lot of unknown. I get people being on edge. It's we just don't know, and we're
Yeah.
gonna have to wait and see. And that's the
It,
hardest part, right? Like
yeah, the waiting.
I don't know. So I'd like to say if I was in Ayatollah's position, I would just be like, no, I'm done. Tap out. You know, you've destroyed the upper echelons of my military capacity.
Well, hold on now. Hold on now. Hold on
Basically,
now.
I
Hold on. Hold
basically
on.
have
Hold on.
no.
If you were the American president and China was trying to make the similar demands of you, would you surrender?
No, but no, I
There you
wouldn't.
go.
But the difference is like
Well,
Iran is
if the
hopelessly outgunned.
assuming the power dynamic was the same.
Right. So that's the thing is there is no comparing the power dynamic of the U.S., especially combined with Israel, which is just U.S. but more. Um, there is no power comparison here. So the Israelis and the U.S. have complete air dominance. So in that first strike, they no, this was actually
Right.
before
No,
the
no,
actual
no, no, no.
open
No,
war.
I get, no, I get all that. But what I'm saying is that like if you were president of the United States, and let's just say it's 50 years from now, we're in a totally weakened state. We have no capabilities for response. We have no capabilities to build a response within like a decade. And China was being like, "Hey, you're going to sign over all this stuff, or we're going to end your existence." What would you do? Would you fight or would you
Yeah.
capitulate?
So that is kind of the thing. Like you want to go out fighting, right? And that
Well,
very
some
well may
people,
happen.
yeah, that's what I'm asking you. You know, it's so we can say like, yeah, I hope the Ayatollah realizes he's in a shit position. It's like, well, yeah, just because you're in a shit position doesn't mean you're going to surrender, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it does not. It does not. Um, and maybe you're right. So if I'm president in 50 years, and we've just lost all hope of, maybe I don't capitulate. Maybe like fuck you, I'll go out fighting. Like you'll have to kill me, and that very well could be what they choose to do. Um, there's no idea, man. Like I said, there's
Yeah,
too many variables at consideration to see where this is going to go. But I think it's gonna escalate really quickly. I do think that. So either Iran will capitulate or they will not, and they'll start issuing strikes on either the Strait of Hormuz or U.S. military bases. They'll probably keep bombarding Israel. No, so I think at least for the immediate future, they'll probably focus on whatever they're going to do to the U.S. or the Strait, just because it's going to be easier.
yeah,
Uh, we'll see if any other country. So again, I think Pakistan threatened to get involved. I think Hezbollah threatened to get involved. I know the Houthis are like, fuck yeah, let's go. Um, and we're gonna have the same problem. So the same problem Israel's having, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, with like missile deterrence, is it's a lot more expensive for the interceptors than it is for these drones, and it's gonna be a lot of money if they decide to start launching at tankers and stuff. And it would be honestly, like, just speaking purely fiscally, it would be better to come in and just wipe out their capacity to launch these attacks on the strait than it would be to defend the strait, right? Put aside whether or not that's the best strategy, but just fiscally, it would be better to just wipe out that capacity.
right, right.
um, I don't know. It's crazy. A lot has happened in just this month. I mean, really, this has to be like the most, I don't want to say like productive, but like impactful 300 days of a president in my lifetime. Like it's just nuts. Everything. So we had the war with India and Pakistan. There was another war that Trump mentions that he ended with economic promises. We had the overthrow of Syria. We had Israel finishing up its war with Hamas, Hezbollah. We have the Houthis. Now we have Iran. China's apparently gearing up for exercises in Taiwan or near Taiwan. They've got boats in the South China Sea. Russia is still nowhere, apparently nowhere near making a deal. They're just still, stringing along Ukraine and the U.S. Like it is a fucking shit show right now. And I hope that within at least the next couple years, or maybe even the next 6 months, we start getting some of these things checked off the list.